why it's important that we need to start thinking about government very differently than we have. Whereas we're just not working in silos, but we're working in partnerships with private sector, with other departments. And so you're right, we absolutely have to close the digital divide, but also at the same time, we must not wait until things are perfect. Firstly, it's to implore to other partners in the sector like MTN to join in this bid to connect every child. I want to say to private partners that this department under my leadership is open to private partnerships. We are open to saying 300 billion is never going to get us quality education for all 14 million learners in the sub-country. So unless we partner with people who are prepared to make investment into the system, we're not going to get there.
Welcome to another exciting episode of Sandile Hlangani podcast, where entrepreneurship meets innovation. Today, we are discussing a groundbreaking initiative that aims to connect every child in the country to the internet and laptops. How do you find this portfolio? And number two, the negotiations were based on the fact that you're passionate about education?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a huge portfolio with far-reaching consequences. If we get education right, I really do believe we can fix our unemployment crisis in South Africa. And actually, we can really start to even fix things like the socio-economic ills that dog our communities. So for me, it's an incredible honor, but it's also the recognition that there's so much work to be done. 14 million learners in the custody of this department, 500,000 educators who are the employees of this department. And so there are many cogs in this machine, and we have to get it right. We've got to increase literacy levels, and we've got to keep learners safe in schools.
We cannot talk about the laptops and the fact that these kids need to be given these laptops without talking about the fact that we are still faced with a digital divide. Why are we still talking about digital divide in 2024?
So this is why the partnerships are incredibly important, because as the DBE, we can only do so much in terms of making sure that our learners are in class and we're protecting learning and teaching time. But if we partner with departments like communications and digital technologies, when we partner with partners like MTN, for instance, we can start to say, right, how does the private sector come on board in terms of making sure that we've got access to broadband, and whether you live in Mkanduli or you live in Soweto or whether you live in Sandton, you've got access to the same amount of strength of connectivity that as any child. And so this is why it's important that we need to start thinking about government very differently than we have. Whereas we're just not working in silos, but we're working in partnerships with private sector, with other departments. And so you're right, we absolutely have to close the digital divide, but also at the same time, we must not wait until things are perfect. The world is moving, and it's moving at pace, and we do not want particularly poor black learners to be left behind.
I'm glad you mentioned the fact that there's a need to connect schools in rural areas. What measures or rather plan you guys as a department have to make sure that we enroll this program?
Yeah. So I mean, so firstly, it's to implore to other partners in the sector like MTN to join in this bid to connect every child. I think it's an incredible campaign, and we are grateful that we've got partners in South Africa that are not just looking at these are not corporates that are just looking at the bottom line, but many corporates are wanting to come on board. And I want to say to them, and I want to say to private partners, that this department under my leadership is open to private partnerships. We are open to saying 300 billion is never going to get us quality education for all 14 million learners in the sub-country. So unless we partner with people who are prepared to make investment into the system, we're not going to get there. And so rural communities are very close to my heart, because ultimately we can talk about connectivity and kids in Soweto may be able to access those, but there are kids who are sitting in Lusigisigi, who are sitting in Kwakwa, who still want to say, look, I mean, it might be nice to have a device, but I don't have connectivity where I live. And that is why the Minister of Communications and Technologies is here to say, how do you make sure that your department delivers on the connectivity of our country?
So will there be any changes in the curriculum as this program is enrolled? Because there has been many within the education sector who have been criticizing the curriculum to say that it does not equip the kids to become, for example, entrepreneurs. So will there be any changes in the curriculum?
Look, I mean, the next 5 years, we're going to have to look at how do we strengthen the curriculum. And one of the things is exactly that. How do we match the curriculum with the needs of the economy? We need to stop looking at education as just being a social portfolio. This is a strong economic lever in our country. If we get it right and we equip our learners with the right skills that the economy needs, we can make sure whether you're leaving school at the age of grade 9 or you're leaving school at the age of grade 12, you can walk into any kind of job that you want. And speaking to these learners here today has made me realize, look, the future is bright. We are not, in this country, we are not short of talent. But what communities need and what our learners need is the requisite support. And that's the kind of commitment that I'm making today to other partners to say, when you invest in this education system, we will make sure that we do our part.
I think the other important stakeholder here in this puzzle is your teachers. What plans do you have in place to make sure that you train teachers so that they are able to impart the skills to the learners?
So when we talk about strengthening the curriculum, we absolutely cannot leave the teacher behind. So when we're talking about changes to the curriculum, we must make sure that the teachers are also kept abreast. And so, upskilling teachers, training teachers, making sure that our teachers are kept up to with pace with moving technology and technological advances is very, very important. And so that's very much on our priorities in this term, in the 7th administration. We're looking forward to making sure that our teachers as well are people who are technologically savvy, who can teach these kind of interventions in our schools.
Enye ingxaki esinayo, Minister, kukubana sithatha i-laptops sizifaka ezikolweni, whether kuku-rural community okanye kusezilokishini, but ingxaki i-community yona kuqala iyavandaliza izikolo, baqhekeze, bathathe ezi laptops. Niza kwenza njani njenge-department ukuqinisekisa okokuba ayenzeki loo nto leyo? Instead, abantu, they take ownership of the very same libraries and izenzayo ezikolweni.
Ibalulekile kakhulu loo nto leyo, njengoba bendisitsho phaa ngaphakathi earlier on ndisithi into yobana kubalulekile into yobana ii-communities nabo baqalise uthatha i-ownership of izikolo zabo. Izikolo ezikwii-communities zethu zii-assets zaba bantwana, zii-assets zezi communities. So kubalulekile into yobana kungavandalizwe. Kubalulekile into yobana xa abantu bebona apha kwi-community into yoba kukhona abantu abayoqhekeza, bayoba iikhompyutha nee-iPads ezikolweni, that siqinisekise into yobana abantu basekwi-community bayayiripota loo nto leyo. Sizawuzama usebenzisana nee-community policing fora, sizawuzama usebenzisana nee-SGB, kodwa into ebalulekileyo into yobana i-community nganye mayiyazi xa kukhona isikolo apha engingqini, it's my responsibility as umzali noma namntana oyapha umake sure into yobana siyasigada sasikolo.
Sabunandi sisixhosa sakho. Enye into engafunanga siyilibale, Minister, kukuba xa singena online kukho i-bullyism online. Ukuqinisekisa ukuthi abantwana babhulishwa online zii-peers zabo okanye ngabanye abantu abangezo-peers zabo abadibana nabo online. Baza kwenza njani ngoba nabazali banenkxalabo when it comes to that?
And it's a big thing, particularly for teenagers zethu. And so nathi njengasebe lezemfundo yinto esiyijongileyo leyo ekwizo kwii-programs zethu. Into yobana sidilishana njani nayo ne-bullying, not only just online but i-bullying nasezikolweni. Ngoba kaloku kufunekile into yobana njengoba umntu efumana le opportunity yofumana loo tablet, into yobana abantu bangabi bespenda ixesha kuTikTok, bespenda ixesha koomaTwitter, bangawenzi umsebenzi wezikolo. And also ngaphezu koko kubalulekile into yobana siyabakhusela abantwana bayazi into yobana, and so it's important into yobana nathi as abazali xa umntana esiza ne-equipment eveke esikolweni into yobana abazali must be involved.
Yeah.
We can't overemphasize that enough. Into yobana as ootishara, as isebe lezemfundo, ixanduva lethu likhona kodwa lihambe liphelele. But xa umntana efika engena endlini funeka uyazi into yoba uze nantoni, yintoni le nto uyifundayo, ukwenzeka ntoni esikolweni, umzali azazise nayo ukwenzela uba aqinisekise umntana into yobana akenzi izinto engafanele kwenzeka.
As we wrap up this conversation with Minister, with you, let's talk about the involvement of the parents. Ba involved kanjani abazali kule program?
The involvement of parents is extremely important, just generally in the education of their children. And of course, it hasn't been something that is super common in our country because, if you're a single mother who is, working as a security guard, who has to leave at 4 a.m. in the morning to go to work and spend 2 hours in commute, there are many things that are dogging South African parents and South African families. So while we're imploring South African parents to be involved, but we must also understand that there are many other socio-economic things that affect their inability to be involved in the schooling of their children. But I do ask, in spite of that, we can't wait until the conditions are perfect. We have to keep moving even when things are imperfect. And in doing so, we've got to make sure that we don't leave this 14 million children behind and that they're not left behind in the global scale. So where parents are able to, we are pleading with them that get involved in the education of your child, get involved in the work of the SGB, understand what the SGB does, what it's meant to do, so that you can be able to see the fruits of your labor.
Thank you so much, Minister.
Thank you.
That's about it for today. If you're inspired by these episodes, please don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. Until next time, keep shining.